The threat came whispered between sips of 30-year-old wine. "Smile, Claire, or I'll make sure your brother doesn't finish his semester." And I didn't realize the man 2 tables over could hear every word until his knife scraped against porcelain like a warning. I smiled. I was good at smiling. Gavin's hand moved from my wrist to my thigh under the table, fingers digging in just hard enough to remind me who paid for this dress, this dinner, the rent on our Lincoln Park apartment. Around us, Marcello's hummed with the kind of low, expensive conversation that came with $800 tasting menus and waiters who moved like ghosts. "There's my girl." Gavin's voice was warm now, public. He lifted his wineglass toward the sommelier with that easy, charming smile that made senior partners at the firm love him. "This is exactly what I needed tonight. You know how to take care of me, don't you, baby?" "Always," I said, and meant, "I'm counting down the days until I have enough saved to leave you." But I'd been counting for 18 months, and the number never seemed to get smaller. My father's medical bills had seen to that. My brother's tuition. The promotion Gavin kept promising me that never materialized because he needed me focused on us, not climbing some corporate ladder. I was a junior forensic accountant at Dalton & Cross, one of the most prestigious investment firms in Chicago, and I spent my days checking other people's work for basic arithmetic errors while Gavin, 5 years older than me, 8 years more experience, pitched to sovereign wealth funds and got his name on the deals I'd quietly flagged and fixed. He'd been a senior analyst when I started as a fresh graduate. He'd seemed sophisticated, protective, successful. By the time I realized the protection was control and the sophistication was polish over cruelty, I was already trapped. "You're distracted." Gavin's fingers tightened again, this time high enough on my thigh that I had to fight not to flinch. "Are you thinking about your brother again? We talked about this, Claire. Sometimes people have to stand on their own 2 feet. Maybe if he had to drop out for a semester, he'd learn some responsibility." My jaw ached from smiling. "You're right. I know I am." He leaned closer, his cologne expensive and cloying. "And you know what else I'm right about? That forensic review you flagged last week. I told you to let it go." The review. A shell company called Adriano Holdings had been moving money through our client accounts in a pattern that didn't make sense. Small enough to slip past automated checks, large enough to add up to 7 figures over 6 months. I'd written it up in my standard anomaly report, the kind of thing that usually got a polite thank you and then disappeared into compliance hell. Gavin had deleted it from the system. "It was probably nothing," I said carefully. "It was nothing." His voice dropped lower, that tone that meant we'd be having a different kind of conversation when we got home. "And if you flag it again, if you go to anyone else about it, I will personally make sure you're blamed for missing it in the first place. Do you understand me?" I understood that Gavin had been staying late at the office more often. That he'd bought a new Rolex last month on a salary that shouldn't cover it. That the shell company's registered address was 2 floors below ours. And when I'd looked up the name, just once, just curious, every search result had come back clean. Too clean. "I understand," I said. And that's when the man 2 tables over stood up. I noticed him the way you notice a storm rolling in. Some animal part of my brain registering danger before my conscious mind caught up. He was tall, dark-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. But it wasn't the suit. It was the way the 2 men with him stood as well, the way the maitre d' appeared out of nowhere with a concerned expression, the way the entire restaurant seemed to tilt slightly in his direction. He walked past our table, stopped, turned back. Gavin Rhodes. His voice was low, accented, Italian, but smoothed over by years of somewhere else. "I thought that was you." Gavin's face did something I'd never seen before. He went pale, then flushed, then forced that charming smile back into place, but his hand disappeared from my thigh. "Mr. Ricci, I didn't realize you ate here." I own it. The man, Ricci, looked at me for the first time, and I felt that look like a physical thing. Dark eyes, unreadable. Taking in the tension in my shoulders, the forced brightness of my smile, the white mark on my wrist where Gavin's fingers had been. "You're going to introduce me to your companion." It wasn't a question. "This is Claire, my girlfriend." Gavin's hand found mine on the table, holding too tight. "Claire, This is Matteo Ricci. He's a client. Very important client. I'd never heard of Matteo Ricci. I'd memorized every major client file at Dalton and Cross as part of my job, and his name wasn't in any of them, which meant he was Gavin's client. Off the books. Claire? Matteo said my name like he was testing it. Then to Gavin. I'd like to borrow her for a moment. I wasn't asking your permission. Matteo's tone didn't change, but something in it made Gavin's protest die in his throat. There's a private dining room upstairs. We have business to discuss. My heart slammed against my ribs. Gavin's hand squeezed mine hard enough to hurt, and I saw the calculation in his eyes, the same calculation I'd learned to read over 2 years of watching him weigh risk versus reward, pride versus profit. He let go of my hand. Of course, Gavin said smoothly. Take all the time you need. I stood because I didn't know what else to do. Because men like Gavin taught you that saying no had consequences. And men like Matteo Ricci, whoever he really was, didn't look like they accepted the word at all. Matteo gestured toward the stairs, and I walked. One of his men fell into step behind us. The private dining room was small, elegant, soundproofed. A single table set for 2, untouched. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Michigan Avenue, where the city glittered like it wasn't full of people making threats over wine and men who owned restaurants the way other people owned cars. Matteo closed the door. Sit. I sat. My hands were shaking, so I folded them in my lap where he couldn't see. He didn't sit. He stood at the window, looking out at Chicago like he was deciding whether to keep it or burn it down. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost casual. How long has he been hitting you? He doesn't. The lie died before I could finish it. Something about this man made lying feel dangerous, like he'd know and it would cost me. He doesn't hit. He just holds on too tight sometimes. I see. Matteo turned to face me, leaning against the window frame. And the threat about your brother's tuition, is that new or does he do that often? My throat closed. You heard that. I hear everything in my restaurant, Claire. He said my name again, and I hated that I noticed. Everything, including the part where you smiled and said always, like you meant it. When we both know you were thinking about how to leave him, I couldn't breathe. I don't know what you want me to say. The truth. He moved then, crossing to the table and sitting across from me. Up close, he was younger than I'd thought, maybe late 30s, with the kind of face that belonged in old Italian paintings, beautiful and brutal at once. You're Claire Monroe, 28, junior forensic accountant at Dalton and Cross, bachelor's degree in mathematics from Northwestern, graduated summa cum laude. You have a younger brother at DePaul studying engineering. Your father died 2 years ago, left you with approximately $80,000 in medical debt. You live with Gavin Rhodes, who controls your money, your career, and apparently your family's future. Ice flooded my veins. How do you? The same way I know you flagged Adriano Holdings last week. His eyes never left mine. The same way I know Gavin deleted your report. The same way I know that you're the only person at that firm smart enough to have caught what he's doing. My pulse was so loud in my ears, I almost didn't hear my own voice. What is he doing? Stealing from me. Matteo's tone was conversational, but something flickered behind his eyes that made my survival instincts scream. Through Adriano Holdings, small amounts, carefully structured, designed to look like processing fees and currency fluctuations. He's been skimming for 8 months, almost $9 million. $9 million. I thought of Gavin's new watch, his casual mention of looking at summer houses in Lake Forest, the way he'd insisted I stop flagging anomalies in certain accounts. I didn't know, I said, and then hated myself for sounding defensive. I know you didn't. Matteo leaned back in his chair, studying me. If you'd known, you would have documented it properly. You're meticulous. You've caught and corrected 47 significant errors in the past year alone, most of them on accounts Gavin claimed credit for. You're very good at your job, Claire, much better than he is at his. The compliment felt like a trap, but some small, starved part of me wanted to live in it for just a moment. When was the last time anyone had said I was good at something? Why am I here? I asked. Because I need someone I can trust to trace exactly where my money went. Someone who understands financial structures and won't miss the details. Someone who has access to Dalton and Cross's systems and Gavin's files. He paused. Someone who has excellent reasons to want him destroyed. Want. Such a small word for the thing that lived in my chest, burning hotter every day. And if I say no? Then you go back downstairs, finish your dinner, go home with him. Mateo's voice was perfectly level. And tomorrow someone will send the SEC an anonymous tip about suspicious activity at Dalton and Cross, with your name specifically attached to the accounts in question. You'll be investigated, probably fired, almost certainly charged. Gavin will testify that he tried to get you to report the discrepancies, but you refused. He'll cry at your trial. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They'd gone numb. That's not fair. No, Mateo agreed. It's not, but fair isn't something I trade in. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, and I smelled cedar and something darker. Here's what is fair. You help me trace my money and document exactly how Gavin stole it. In return, I pay off every dollar of your father's medical debt. I make sure your brother finishes school, full ride, any program he wants. I set you up in your own apartment, your name only, and I guarantee that Gavin Rhodes never touches you or threatens you again. It was too much, too easy. Men didn't just offer to solve your entire life because you could read a spreadsheet. What else? I asked. What aren't you telling me? For the first time, Mateo smiled. It was slight, barely there, but it changed his whole face. Smart girl. He pulled out his phone, slid it across the table. On the screen was a photo of Gavin at a restaurant I didn't recognize, sitting across from two men I'd never seen. Those are the Calabrese brothers. They run drugs and guns through the port of Chicago. They're also my competitors. Gavin isn't just stealing from me. He's doing it to fund their operation, which means when I take him down, I need to take them down too. And for that, I need more than financial records. I need someone inside Dalton and Cross who can track their entire network. Inside, the word stuck in my throat. For how long? As long as it takes. He took his phone back. Could be weeks, could be months. You'll report to me. You'll live in a place I choose, for your safety. You'll do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you. So I'd be trading one controlling man for another. No. His voice hardened. You'd be trading a coward who threatens your family for a man who pays his debts. I'm not offering you freedom, Claire. I'm offering you a weapon. What you do with it after we're done, that's up to you. I looked at him, really looked. At the expensive suit and the cold eyes and the absolute certainty in his voice that I would say yes, because what choice did I have? Except I did have a choice. I could say no. Could go back to Gavin. Could try to save enough money on my own. Could spend another year or 2 or 5 playing the good girlfriend while he gaslit me, and stole and tightened his grip until I forgot what it felt like to breathe. Or I could say yes to this dangerous man and his dangerous offer. And maybe, I could finally stop smiling when I didn't mean it. I have conditions, I said. Mateo raised an eyebrow. Do you? My brother doesn't know anything about this. Whatever you do, whoever you are, he stays completely separate. Not a scholarship from some shell company you control. A real clean scholarship that won't blow back on him. Agreed. I need access to my own money. I'm not going to be dependent on you the way I was dependent on Gavin. You'll have your own account. I'll fund it with $50,000 to start. $50,000. I tried not to react. And when this is over, I walk away. No strings, no obligations, no one more job. We're done. Mateo was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching mine. Then he stood, pulled out a business card, and set it on the table between us. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., this address. He walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. One more thing, Claire. When you go back downstairs, Gavin is going to ask what we discussed. You're going to tell him I was angry about a late report and wanted to know if you'd processed the paperwork correctly. You apologized. I accepted. It was nothing. And if he doesn't believe me, he will, because you're going to sell it the same way you've been selling every smile, every yes, every you're right for the past 2 years. Mateo opened the door. You're very good at performing, Claire. Tomorrow, you start performing for me. He left. I sat alone in that beautiful room, staring at the business card, my heart racing and my hands steady for the first time in months. I'd made my choice. Now I just had to survive it. The apartment Mateo's people moved me into wasn't an apartment. It was a penthouse in River North, with floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen I'd never use, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. The kind of place Gavin had always promised we'd live in someday. When he made partner, when I learned to be patient, when I stopped asking questions, I stood in the living room at 6 a.m., watching the city wake up, and tried to remember how I'd gotten here. Yesterday, the restaurant, the deal. Going back downstairs to tell Gavin exactly what Mateo had scripted, watching him believe every word, because men like him never thought women like me could lie convincingly. Last night, packing a single bag while Gavin slept off too much wine, leaving a note about staying with my brother for a few days, taking only what I'd brought into the relationship. This morning, a black car outside my brother's building, a driver who didn't speak, and a key card to a place that cost more per month than I made in a year. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, conference room, 40th floor, 1 hour. Am I showered, dressed in one of my work outfits, navy sheath dress, blazer, the armor I wore to be taken seriously at Dalton and Cross. My hands were steady as I applied minimal makeup. I looked like a junior accountant going to audit someone's quarterly reports. I looked like exactly what Mateo needed me to be. The 40th floor required a different key card, one that had been waiting on my kitchen counter. The elevator opened onto a single set of frosted glass doors. I pushed through. The conference room was all dark wood and leather, with a view that made my penthouse look modest. Mateo sat at the head of a long table, wearing a different suit but the same expression of absolute control. 2 other men flanked him, one older, silver-haired, watching me with cold assessment, one younger, massive, with scars on his knuckles. Claire, on time. Mateo gestured to the chair across from him. This is Marco, my financial officer, and Luca, head of security. You'll report to all 3 of us. I sat, kept my voice level. Good morning. We'll see. Marco slid a thin folder across the table. Everything we have on Adriano Holdings and the Calabrese network. It's incomplete. That's why you're here. I opened the folder. Transaction records, shell company registrations, shipping manifests with obvious gaps. It was sloppy work, deliberately obscured, but I'd seen worse. At Dalton and Cross, I'd learned to trace money through structures designed by people much smarter than whoever had set this up. This is amateur hour, I said, flipping through pages. Whoever structured this didn't even bother to vary the timing patterns. Look, every transfer happens within 48 hours of a corresponding deposit to this account. It's not even hidden. Silence. I looked up. All 3 men were staring at me. What? I asked. Keep going, Mateo said quietly. I turned back to the documents, my brain sliding into the familiar rhythm of pattern recognition. The Adriano Holdings registration lists an address in Delaware, but the actual transfers route through accounts in Luxembourg, then the Caymans, then back to Chicago. That's not sophistication. That's someone who read an article about money laundering and thought more steps meant more security. It doesn't. It just creates more data points to track. I pulled out my phone, opened the Notes app, started sketching the flow. If I can access the corresponding dates in Dalton and Cross's client transaction records, I can map every dollar, but I'll need login credentials for the compliance database, not just my standard user access. Why? Marco's voice was sharp. Because Gavin's been deleting my anomaly reports from the standard system, which means he has someone in compliance helping him. If I flag anything through normal channels, they'll know. I need to pull the raw data directly, build the case outside the official structure, then present it all at once so no one has time to cover their tracks. I looked up again. Marco was leaning back in his chair, reassessing. Luca's expression hadn't changed, but something had shifted in his posture. Less guard dog, more interested observer. Mateo's eyes were locked on mine, dark and intent. How long? He asked. To map the full network, 3 days if I work fast. 5 if you want it thorough enough to hold up in court. I stopped. You don't care about court, do you? No, Matteo said. But I care about thorough. 5 days. Marco will get you the credentials. You'll work from here, not your office. That's a problem. If I'm not at Dalton and Cross, Gavin will notice. He tracks my calendar, my meetings, everything. I need to be visible, normal, or he'll know something's wrong. Then you'll go to work, Matteo said. Do your regular job. Smile at Gavin. Have lunch with him if he asks. And every evening, you'll come here and do your real work. My real work. Something about the way he said it made my chest feel tight. What about when I find the full network? I asked. What happens to Gavin? That depends on what you find, Matteo stood, buttoning his jacket. If it's just him skimming, he'll wish I'd killed him. If the Calabrese brothers are as deep in Dalton and Cross as I think they are, then he's a loose thread. And loose threads get cut. You said you don't kill. I don't. His smile was cold. But I know people who do. And sometimes the best thing I can do for someone is make sure those people never learn their name. He walked to the door, then paused. Claire, you did well just now. The analysis, the questions, the confidence. That's what I need from you. Not the woman who smiled at Gavin last night. The woman who just told 3 dangerous men their security was amateur hour. Heat crept up my neck. I didn't mean, yes you did. Don't apologize for being right. He held the door open. Luca will drive you to work. You'll check in every night at 8 p.m. Miss a check-in, and I'll assume you're compromised. Compromised, I repeated. You mean dead. I mean, I'll come get you myself. Something flickered in his expression, too fast to read. And you don't want that, Claire. When I come to get someone, I'm not asking permission anymore. He left. Marco and Luca followed. I sat alone in that conference room, staring at the sloppy financial structures in front of me, my pulse racing. 3 days ago, I'd been cutting risotto into tiny bites and swallowing threats with wine. Now I was telling Mafia lieutenants their money laundering was amateur hour. I pulled the documents closer and got to work. The next 4 days developed a rhythm that felt like living in 2 different worlds. Daytime Claire, I went to Dalton and Cross, sat in my cubicle, processed expense reports, and flagged obvious errors in junior analyst work. Had lunch with Gavin twice, once at his insistence, once when he surprised me at my desk with sushi and apologies for being stressed at Marcello's. He was charming, attentive, kept his hands to himself in public, and his voice warm. I smiled, laughed at his jokes, let him talk about the new client he was courting, some tech startup looking for Series B funding. And every word he said, I filed away to report to Matteo. Nighttime Claire, I went to the 40th floor, spread transaction records across that long table, built spreadsheets and network maps and timelines that showed exactly how $9 million had moved from Matteo's accounts into Calabrese hands. It was beautiful work in a sick way. Gavin had used my own employer's infrastructure, my own access codes early on, my own flagged reports as a guide for what to avoid. He'd structured everything to make me look complicit if it ever came to light. He'd been planning to burn me from the beginning. Marco came by every night to check my progress. By day 3, he stopped asking questions and just watched me work, occasionally nodding when I explained a particularly clever piece of the puzzle. You're wasted at that firm, he said on the 4th night. I know, I said, and realized I meant it. Luca brought me food, good food, not the takeout I'd have ordered. Pasta, bread, wine I barely touched. He never spoke much, but he stayed in the room while I worked, a silent presence that somehow made me feel safer than I'd felt in years. And Matteo. Matteo came by every night around 10, when the work was deep and my eyes were tired. He'd sit at the other end of the table, reading through my documentation, asking sharp questions that made me sharper. This account, he said on night 4, pointing to a Luxembourg holding company. You marked it as high priority. Why? Because it's newer than the others. Opened 6 weeks ago, right after I flagged a different suspicious account. I think Gavin's creating fresh structures to replace the ones I was getting close to. Which means he knows someone's watching. He's getting nervous. I pulled up another spreadsheet. And nervous people make mistakes. Look, 3 days ago, he moved 100,000 through this account in a single transaction. Everything else has been under 50. That's sloppy. That's panic. Matteo leaned back, studying me instead of the screen. What would you do if you were running this operation? It felt like a test. I'd shut it down, move the money somewhere completely different, outside Dalton and Cross entirely, cut losses and disappear before whoever's chasing me gets close enough to matter. And if you couldn't disappear, then I'd find leverage, something valuable enough to trade for my life. I met his eyes. I'd find out what my enemy needed most and make sure destroying me meant losing it. The corner of his mouth lifted. That's exactly what Gavin's doing. My blood went cold. What do you mean? He knows I'm close. Has for weeks. Matteo stood, walked around the table toward me. The question is, what leverage does he think he has? Me, I whispered. He thinks you need me. The compliance access, the inside knowledge. He thinks if he threatens me, you'll back off. And would I? I looked up at him, standing close enough now that I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw. Close enough that I had to tilt my head back to hold his gaze. I don't know, I said honestly. Would you? 3 days ago, you were a tool. Useful, yes, but replaceable. His voice was low, almost thoughtful. Now, you found things Marco missed. Anticipated moves before my security team saw them coming. You're not a tool anymore, Claire. You're a weapon. And I don't give up my weapons easily. It shouldn't have felt like a compliment. It shouldn't have made heat pool low in my stomach. But it did. What happens tomorrow? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. When I finish mapping the network? Tomorrow night we have a different kind of meeting. He reached out, and I thought he might touch my face. But instead he tapped the spreadsheet in front of me. Finish this, then go home. Sleep. You've been here until 2 a.m. every night this week. So have you. I don't sleep much. Something dark crossed his expression. Haven't in years. He walked to the door, and I should have let him go. Should have turned back to my work. Instead, I asked, why me? Really? You could have threatened Gavin directly, hacked the accounts, hired a forensic firm. Why did you need me specifically? Matteo stopped, turned. Because men like Gavin think women like you are invisible, support staff, pretty accessories who process paperwork and don't ask questions. He moved back toward me, and this time there was something dangerous in the way he moved. And I've built my entire empire on using what people think doesn't matter. You want to know why I chose you, Claire? Because the most dangerous weapon is the one no one sees coming. He left before I could respond. I sat there, hands shaking, staring at financial records that suddenly felt less important than the way my heart was racing. I was in trouble. Not the Gavin kind. Not the Calabrese kind. The Matteo Ricci kind, which was infinitely worse. On the 5th night, I came to the 40th floor with a complete network map. 12 shell companies. 47 accounts across 6 countries. Every dollar traced, every transaction dated, every person involved identified by name or position. It was the best work I'd ever done. Marco looked at it and swore in Italian. Luca looked at it and smiled for the first time since I'd met him. Matteo looked at it and said, "Show me the vulnerabilities." I walked them through it, pointed out the accounts that were most exposed, the transactions that violated federal banking law, the people in the network who could be pressured to flip. Here's the spine, I said, highlighting a series of accounts. Cut these and the whole thing collapses. The Calabrese brothers lose their access to Dalton and Cross. Gavin loses his value to them, and your money stops flowing out. And Gavin, Matteo asked. I pulled up a separate document. This is everything I can prove he did personally. Theft, fraud, falsifying compliance reports. It's enough to destroy his career and put him in federal prison for 10 to 15 years. But it also exposes me. My credentials were used in the early structure. If this goes to the FBI, I'll be questioned, probably investigated. Even if I'm cleared eventually, my career is over. The room went quiet. So we don't go to the FBI, Marco said. No, Matteo agreed. We don't. He looked at me. How much does Gavin know about you and me? He knows I met with you. He thinks it was about a processing error. He's been careful, watching me more closely. He asked to see my calendar twice this week. And your brother? Safe. He thinks I've been working late. I hesitated. But Gavin mentioned him again yesterday. Asked if everything was okay with the family. It felt like a warning. Matteo's jaw tightened. Luca. Put 2 men on the brother. Rotate shifts. If Gavin or anyone connected to the Calabrese brothers gets within 100 feet of him, I want to know. Done, Luca said, already texting. Claire? Matteo turned to me. Tomorrow night there's a fundraiser at the Art Institute. Black tie, very expensive. Exactly the kind of event where Gavin and the Calabrese brothers do business in public. You're going to be my date. My stomach dropped. What? Gavin needs to see that you're mine now, not his. The Calabrese brothers need to understand that touching you means going through me. He said it like it was simple, like he was discussing quarterly projections. And I need you there to identify people. You've built this network. Now I need you to put faces to names. Gavin will lose his mind if I show up with you. Yes, Matteo said. He will. And when he does, when he panics and makes mistakes, we'll be ready. I thought about Gavin's hand on my wrist. His threats whispered over wine. The way he'd deleted my reports and planned to sacrifice me. What do I wear? I asked. Matteo's smile was slow, dangerous. Something that makes it very clear you're not his anymore. The dress arrived at noon. I was at my desk at Dalton and Cross, pretending to review a client's expense allocations, when my phone buzzed with a delivery notification. The driver was waiting in the lobby. I went downstairs, signed for a garment bag that probably cost more than my car, and took it to the women's restroom to look. The dress was black, simple at first glance, sleeveless, fitted, falling to just above the knee. But the fabric moved like water, and when I held it up to the light, I saw the subtle detail work. Tiny crystals scattered across the bodice like stars, a back that plunged low enough to make a statement. There was a note pinned inside, written in sharp, precise handwriting. Luca will pick you up at 7. Don't eat, we'll have dinner there. Wear your hair down. M. I stared at that last line longer than I should have. Gavin had always insisted I wear my hair up for professional events. Said it made me look polished and serious. I'd stopped questioning it years ago, the same way I'd stopped questioning the clothes he bought me, the way he ordered for me at restaurants, the opinions he had about everything from my lipstick shade to my laugh. I wore my hair down. Luca picked me up at 7 exactly, in a car that was too expensive to look expensive. He handed me a small box without comment. Inside was a necklace, delicate gold chain, single diamond pendant. Real, I could tell by the weight. I can't accept this, I said. It's not a gift. It's part of the costume. Luca's voice was gruff, but not unkind. Everything you wear tonight says you belong to Matteo now. The dress, the jewels, the way you walk into that room. Gavin needs to believe it. So do the Calabrese brothers. I put on the necklace. The Art Institute was lit up like a jewel box, full of Chicago's wealthiest pretending to care about Impressionist paintings, while making deals in the sculpture garden. I walked in on Luca's arm, not Matteo's, I noticed. Some subtle distinction I didn't understand yet. And then I saw him. Matteo stood near the main staircase, wearing a tuxedo that looked like it had been designed specifically to make every other man in the room disappear. He was talking to an older couple, charming and at ease, but the moment I entered his line of sight, everything stopped. He looked at me the way other people looked at art they wanted to own. Claire. He crossed to us, took my hand from Luca's arm, and tucked it into his own. His fingers were warm, steady. You look perfect. You told me what to wear, I said, trying to sound unaffected and failing. I told you the color. You did everything else. His thumb brushed across my knuckles, just once. Ready? To identify criminals at a charity fundraiser? Sure, I do this every Friday. His mouth curved. Stay close. If you see anyone from your network maps, squeeze my arm twice. Don't point, don't stare. Just squeeze. We moved into the crowd. It took 11 minutes before I spotted the first one. Older man, early 60s, gray hair, talking to a woman in diamonds near the Monet exhibit. I knew him from a series of wire transfers. Account manager at a Luxembourg bank. Processed 80% of the Adriano Holdings transactions. I squeezed Mateo's arm twice. He didn't react, just guided me smoothly toward a different gallery, murmuring names and details in my ear like we were discussing the paintings. The man in gray, you're certain? Completely. He approved transactions on the 15th and 23rd of every month like clockwork. That's him. Good girl. The praise hit me harder than it should have. I focused on breathing normally. We spotted 4 more over the next hour. A lawyer who'd set up shell companies, a Dalton and Cross compliance officer who'd deleted my reports, a shipping executive who handled Calabrese cargo. Each time, I squeezed. Each time, Mateo cataloged the information with terrifying calm. And then Gavin found us. Claire. His voice cut through the elegant crowd noise like a knife. I turned, and there he was. Handsome in his tuxedo, smile in place, fury in his eyes. Gavin. I kept my voice level. I didn't know you were coming tonight. Last-minute invitation, client table. His gaze flicked to Mateo, then back to me. I've been calling you all day. You didn't answer. I've been busy. Busy. He moved closer, and I felt Mateo's hand settle on my lower back, possessive and warm through the thin fabric. You've been staying with your brother, you said. But when I stopped by DePaul this afternoon to drop off some books for him, he said he hasn't seen you in a week. My heart stopped. Gavin. So where have you been, Claire? His voice was still pleasant, but something ugly moved beneath it. Because it looks like you've been busy with Mr. Ricci here. New dress, new jewelry, new attitude. How long has this been going on? Careful. Mateo's voice was quiet, but it made Gavin take a step back. You're making a scene. Am I? Gavin's smile sharpened. Or am I just asking my girlfriend why she's been lying to me? Unless she's not my girlfriend anymore. Is that what this is? You're trading up. We're done, Gavin. The words came out stronger than I expected. We've been done for a long time. I just finally had the resources to leave. Resources. He laughed, loud enough that people were starting to stare. Is that what you're calling it? You mean you found a richer man to leech off of? God, Claire, I thought you had more self-respect than this. Heat flooded my face. Don't. How much is he paying you? Gavin looked at Mateo now, all pretense of charm gone. Because I can promise you, whatever she's doing for you, it's not worth it. She's mediocre at her job, clingy as hell, and in bed she's... Mateo moved. I didn't see him decide to. One moment he was standing beside me, the next he had Gavin by the throat, shoved against a marble column, the entire room going silent. For a heartbeat, I should have been afraid of Mateo, and I was. But for the first time, Gavin looked smaller than me. Finish that sentence, Mateo said softly. Please. Gavin's face was turning red. You're making a mistake. No, you made the mistake. Mateo leaned closer. You stole from me. You used her credentials to do it. And now you're standing in a room full of witnesses, insulting the woman who's about to destroy your entire life. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to Claire. Then you're going to walk away. And tomorrow morning, you're going to resign from Dalton and Cross and leave Chicago. Permanently. I'm not. Mateo's hand tightened. Or I can show everyone in this room exactly what you've been doing with Adriano Holdings, including the FBI agents by the bar. Your choice. He let go. Gavin stumbled, gasping, his perfect facade cracked wide open. He looked at me and I saw real fear there for the first time. This isn't over, he said hoarsely. Yes, I said. It is. He walked away. The crowd pretended nothing had happened. Conversations resuming like someone hadn't just been choked in front of a Renoir. Mateo took my hand. We're leaving. But we haven't. Now, Claire. Something in his voice made me follow without arguing. Luca appeared from nowhere, falling into step behind us as we moved through the museum and out to the car. The drive back was silent. Mateo stared out the window, jaw tight, one hand curled into a fist on his thigh. When we reached my building, he got out with me. You don't have to, I started. Inside. He nodded to Luca, who drove away. We need to talk. We rode the elevator in silence. I unlocked the penthouse door with shaking hands, very aware of him behind me. This man who'd just threatened my ex-boyfriend in front of Chicago's elite without blinking. Inside, he went straight to the windows, looking out at the city. I shouldn't have done that, he said finally. Choked him? Made it public. He turned to face me. I showed them you matter to me. That's leverage. Claire, the Calabrese brothers were at that fundraiser. They saw everything. And now they know the fastest way to hurt me is through you. So what do? We accelerate the timeline. I had a plan. Careful, surgical, over the next month. That's done now. We move tomorrow. He pulled out his phone, made 3 calls in rapid Italian. When he finished, he looked at me. How much do you trust me? I don't know, I said honestly. You terrify me. Good. You should be terrified. He moved closer. Because tomorrow morning, I'm going to destroy Gavin Rhodes, dismantle the Calabrese operation, and restructure half of Dalton and Cross's client accounts. And you're going to help me do it. But once we start, there's no stopping, no changing your mind. No going back to your quiet accounting job and pretending this never happened. I never wanted to go back, I whispered. Something flared in his eyes. What do you want, Claire? The question hung between us, loaded with more than just business, more than just revenge. I wanted to not be invisible anymore, to not be gaslit and controlled and told I was mediocre when I knew I was brilliant. I wanted to use my mind for something that mattered, even if that something was dark and dangerous and probably going to ruin me. I wanted him to keep looking at me like I was the most interesting problem he'd ever tried to solve. I want to finish what we started, I said. That's not an answer. Yes, it is. We stood there, too close, the tension thick enough to choke on. His hand lifted, almost touched my face, then dropped. Tomorrow, he said roughly, get some sleep, we have work to do. He left. I stood alone in that expensive penthouse, my heart racing, the ghost of his almost touch burning on my skin. I couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m., I gave up and opened my laptop. Started going through the network maps again, looking for anything I'd missed, any vulnerability that could blow back on us. That's when I saw it. A new transaction, dated today. $1 million, moved from one of the Calabrese accounts into a Dalton and Cross internal holding account. The account number was familiar. I'd seen it before, flagged it months ago as unusual, but been told to drop it. It was Gavin's discretionary fund, the one he used for client entertainment and business development. But this transfer wasn't entertainment money. I pulled up the transaction details, my pulse pounding in my ears. The memo line read, Asset Acquisition, CM, Claire Monroe. They'd just paid Gavin $1 million for me. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone, called Matteo. It went straight to voicemail. I called again, nothing. I called Luca. He answered on the first ring. What's wrong? There's a new transaction. The Calabrese brothers just paid Gavin for me. I think, my voice cracked. I think he sold me to them. Stay there. Lock the doors. I'm sending someone. The line went dead. Not disconnected. Cut. My phone still showed call in progress. But there was nothing on the other end. No static, no click, just a manufactured silence that felt worse than any dropped signal. I ran to the windows, looked down at the street 40 floors below. 3 black SUVs were parked outside my building. Men in suits were going inside. They were coming for me. I had maybe 2 minutes. I grabbed my laptop, shoved it in my bag along with my phone, the flash drive with backup files, ran to the door, looked through the peephole. Empty hallway. For now, I couldn't go down, couldn't go out the front. But this was a luxury building. There had to be service elevators, fire stairs, something. I opened the door, and Gavin was standing there. Hello, Claire. Behind him were 2 men I didn't recognize. Big, armed, professional. The Calabrese brothers want to meet you, Gavin said, conversationally. They're very interested in how much you know about their business. And I figured, since you've been such a helpful little informant for Matteo, maybe you could be helpful for them too. You sold me. The words tasted like ash. I solved a problem, he smiled. And it was the smile I'd once thought was charming. You cost me Matteo's trust. You're about to cost me my career, so I found a buyer. The Calabrese brothers pay well for information, and you, baby, are full of it. One of the men grabbed my arm, and I made my choice. I drove my elbow into his throat, grabbed the laptop bag, and ran. Not for the elevator, for the emergency stairs at the end of the hall. I heard shouting behind me, footsteps pounding. But I was already through the door and flying down concrete steps in heels and a designer dress. 20 floors down, I heard the door above me slam open. 30 floors down, my lungs were burning. 35 floors, I kicked off my heels and kept running. Ground floor, I burst out into the parking garage, looking for anything, a car, an exit, a weapon. A black Mercedes screeched to a stop in front of me. The passenger door flew open. "Get in," Mateo's voice. I got in. He drove before my door was even closed, tires screaming on concrete. Behind us, I saw Gavin and his men spill into the garage. "How did you—" Luca called. I was already on my way. He took a corner fast enough to slam me against the door. "Are you hurt?" "No, but Gavin sold me $1 million. There's a transaction." "I know. I saw it 20 minutes ago." His jaw was tight. "That's why I was coming to get you. I should have moved you sooner, should have known He cut himself off. This is my fault. It's Gavin's fault." I was shaking now, adrenaline crashing. "And I'm not going to let him win." Mateo looked at me then, really looked, and something shifted in his expression. "No," he said quietly. "You're not." He pulled out his phone, made a call. "Marco, it's happening now. Move on, everyone. I want the Calabrese brothers' assets frozen, their accounts emptied, and every person on Claire's list picked up within the hour. And Marco, find Gavin Rhodes. When you do, bring him to me." He hung up. We drove through Chicago's empty streets, the city lights blurring past. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Somewhere safe." He glanced at me. "Somewhere they'll never think to look." "Which is?" His smile was dangerous. "My home." Mateo's home wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined something cold and modern, all glass and steel like the office tower. Instead, he pulled up to a restored Greystone in Lincoln Park, the kind of place with ivy on the walls and wrought iron gates that looked like they'd been there 100 years. Inside was warm. Dark wood floors, leather furniture worn soft with use, bookshelves that actually had books. It felt lived in, real. "This is where you actually live," I said, following him through a hallway lined with black and white photographs. "Not some sterile penthouse. The penthouse is for business. This is home." He locked the door behind us, set an alarm, then turned to look at me. Really look at me for the first time since the parking garage. "You're barefoot." I glanced down. I'd forgotten about kicking off my heels during the escape. My feet were cut up from the concrete stairs, small streaks of blood on his floor. "I'll clean." "Sit." He pointed to the couch, then disappeared down the hallway. I sat, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me shaky and cold despite the warm house. I pulled my knees up, wrapped my arms around them, and tried not to think about Gavin's smile when he'd said I found a buyer. Mateo came back with a first aid kit, a blanket, and a bottle of whiskey. He poured 2 glasses, handed me one, then knelt in front of me. "Let me see. I can do it myself." "Claire?" His voice was quiet. "Let me." I uncurled, let him take my foot in his hands. His touch was careful, clinical, cleaning the cuts with antiseptic that stung. But his hands were gentle, and something about the gesture, this dangerous man kneeling on his floor, tending to my bleeding feet, made my throat tight. "I should have protected you better," he said, not looking up. "The moment I threatened Gavin at the fundraiser, I should have moved you somewhere secure. I got angry, lost control, and you paid for it. You came for me, because Luca called. Because I saw the transaction. If I'd been 5 minutes later..." His hands tightened slightly on my ankle. "I don't get scared often, Claire, but when I pulled up and saw those men in your building, I was scared." I set down my whiskey glass, reached out, touched his hair. He went very still. "I'm okay," I said softly. "I fought back. I ran. I made the choice to get in your car. You didn't save me, Mateo. We saved each other." He looked up then, and the expression in his eyes was raw, hungry, dangerous. "Don't," he said roughly. "Don't what?" touch me like that. Look at me like that. Not right now, when you've just been threatened and I'm barely holding on to control. He stood abruptly, putting distance between us. You're in shock. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. I stood too, ignoring the sting in my feet. For the first time in years, actually, I know exactly what I want. And what's that? I crossed to him, closed the distance he'd tried to create. I want to finish this, destroy Gavin, dismantle the Calabrese operation, and make sure everyone who underestimated me knows exactly how wrong they were. I looked up at him. And I want you to stop pretending you don't want me. Claire, you called me a weapon. You said I was the most dangerous thing no one saw coming. You look at me like I'm the most interesting problem you've ever solved. My heart was pounding, but I didn't look away. So stop treating me like I'm fragile. I'm not. I'm angry and brilliant and so tired of men deciding what I can handle. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then his hand came up, cupped my face, thumb brushing across my cheekbone. You're going to ruin me, he said quietly. Good. He kissed me, not gently, not tentatively. He kissed me like he'd been starving for it, one hand tangled in my hair, the other sliding down my back to pull me closer. I kissed him back just as hard. Months of fear and anger and wanting channeling into this one moment of finally taking something for myself. He walked me backward until my shoulders hit the wall. His body pressed against mine, and I felt the full force of everything he'd been holding back. His mouth moved from my lips to my jaw, to my throat, and I heard myself make a sound I didn't recognize. Tell me to stop, he breathed against my skin. Tell me this is the shock talking, that you'll regret it tomorrow and I'll stop right now. Don't stop. My hands found his shirt, started working buttons. Don't you dare stop. He lifted me, and I wrapped my legs around his waist as he carried me down the hallway to his bedroom. We barely made it. Somewhere between the door and the bed, we lost my dress, his shirt, any pretense that this was anything but inevitable. He laid me on his bed, looked down at me in the dim light filtering through the windows. Last chance, Claire. I told you, I said, reaching for him. I know what I want. He came down over me and the rest of the world disappeared. I woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. Then I felt the unfamiliar sheets, the soreness in my body, and everything came rushing back. The fundraiser, the betrayal, the escape. Matteo. I sat up, pulling the sheet with me, and found him standing by the window. He was already dressed, dark slacks, white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He had his phone in one hand, but he was looking at me. Marco's been calling for an hour, he said. Everything's moving, but I told him you needed to sleep. What time is it? Almost noon. He set down his phone, crossed to the bed. Sat on the edge, close enough to touch but not touching. How do you feel? Like I just burned down my entire life. Regrets? I thought about it. Really thought about it. About the safe, small life I'd been living. The version of Claire who cut her risotto into tiny bites and swallowed threats with wine. No, I said. No regrets. Something eased in his expression. Good. Because we have work to do. He handed me his phone. On the screen was a news alert. Major financial crimes investigation underway at Chicago investment firm. I scrolled through the article. Dalton and Cross offices raided by the FBI early this morning. Multiple arrests, including senior compliance officers and account managers. Gavin Rhodes named as a person of interest. Whereabouts unknown. How did you... I didn't go to the FBI. I went to someone better. Matteo took the phone back. A federal prosecutor who's been trying to build a case against the Calabrese brothers for 3 years. I gave her everything you found. The network maps, the transactions, the shell companies. All packaged beautifully with a bow. And Gavin. Missing, for now. His jaw tightened. Marco's looking. So is every person who owes me a favor in this city. He'll surface. And when he does, that depends on you. Matteo stood, offered me his hand. Get dressed. There's someone I want you to meet. 20 minutes later, I was in Matteo's kitchen wearing one of his shirts and my clothes from last night, drinking coffee that was probably too expensive for my palate to appreciate. A woman sat across from me, 50s, sharp-eyed, wearing a power suit that screamed federal prosecutor. Claire Monroe. She didn't offer to shake hands. I'm Sarah Chen, Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois. I've spent the last 6 hours reading your documentation, and I have questions. Okay. First, how much of this analysis was done with legitimate access to Dalton and Cross systems? I glanced at Mateo. He nodded slightly. All of it, I said. I'm a junior forensic accountant there. The transactions I traced were within my scope of review. The anomaly reports I filed were part of my job duties. Gavin Rhodes deleted those reports, which is obstruction, but my original work was completely legitimate. And your relationship with Mr. Ricci started 5 days ago when he confronted me about the deleted reports. I had no knowledge of his business interests prior to that meeting. Did he coerce you into providing this analysis? I met her eyes. He offered me protection and resources in exchange for my expertise. I accepted. No coercion necessary. Sarah Chen studied me for a long moment. Then she smiled, small, sharp. You're good, better than good. The case you've built here is airtight. Transaction records, shell company registrations, email trails, shipping manifests. I've had forensic accountants on my team for years who couldn't put something this clean together. Thank you. That wasn't a compliment. That was an observation. She pulled out a business card, slid it across the table. When this is over, when Gavin Rhodes is in custody, when the Calabrese brothers are dismantled, when Dalton and Cross finishes imploding, you should call me. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division is always looking for people with your skills. I picked up the card, felt the weight of what she was offering, a real job. Using my mind for something that mattered. The kind of career I'd dreamed about before Gavin convinced me I wasn't good enough. I'll think about it, I said. Do that. She stood, looked at Mateo. The Calabrese brothers are in custody as of an hour ago. We hit all 4 of their primary operations simultaneously. But Gavin Rhodes is still in the wind, and I need him to close the loop on the Dalton and Cross side. Find him. I will, Mateo said. Sarah Chen left. I sat there, holding her business card, feeling like the world had tilted on its axis. FBI, I said finally. She wants me to work for the FBI. You'd be good at it. Mateo refilled my coffee. But I spent the last 5 days working for you, and it was the best work I've ever done. Challenging, important, using every skill I have. I looked up at him. And I'm not sure I want to go back to chasing white-collar criminals who steal millions when I could be helping you build empires. His expression was unreadable. That's not a life for everyone, Claire. I know. It's dangerous. You'd always be a target. Always looking over your shoulder. I know that too. And I don't do relationships. I don't do soft or safe or normal. I told you, I built my empire on control, and I'm not good at sharing power. I stood, crossed to him, put my hands on his chest, felt his heart beating fast despite the calm in his voice. Then learn, I said, because I'm not interested in being your tool or your weapon or your pretty date who stands quietly at fundraisers. If I stay, I'm your partner, equal. My mind, my choices, my value. I'd rather be invisible in a government cubicle than visible as someone's accessory. Or I walk away right now with Sarah Chen's card, and you never see me again. The silence stretched. Then Mateo's hands came up, framed my face. You're insane. Probably. I could destroy you. You could try, I smiled. But I know where all your money is, remember? He laughed, actually laughed, and it transformed him. Made him look younger, less dangerous, almost human. Equal partners, he said, on one condition, which is, when I find Gavin Rhodes, you let me handle it my way. No police, no FBI, no clean legal resolution. My way. I thought about Gavin's hand on my wrist. His threats whispered over wine. The $1 million he'd accepted to sell me like property. Will you kill him? I asked. No, but I'll make sure he wishes I had. Then yes, I said. Your way. I didn't need his blood. I needed him powerless. He kissed me then, softer this time, deeper, like a promise and a question all at once. When he pulled back, his phone was ringing. He answered, listened, his expression hardening. Where? A pause. Good. Don't let him leave. We're coming now. He hung up, looked at me. Marco found Gavin. He's at O'Hare, trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands under a fake passport. Mateo's smile was cold. Want to come say goodbye? The private room at O'Hare was technically for security purposes, but it felt more like an interrogation chamber. Windowless, soundproofed, just a table and chairs, and Gavin Rhodes sitting in the middle, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Marco and Luca stood by the door. Mateo leaned against the wall, watching. I walked in, and Gavin's head snapped up. Claire? Relief flooded his face. Thank God. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. Tell them I was trying to protect you. You sold me for $1 million, I said calmly. That's not protection, Gavin. That's trafficking. I didn't. They said they just wanted to talk to you. They were armed. You knew exactly what they wanted. I pulled out a chair, sat across from him. You know what's funny? I used to think you were so sophisticated, so much smarter than me, but you're not. You're just a mediocre analyst who got lucky, then got greedy, then got stupid. His face flushed red. I built my career. On my work, on the deals I fixed, the errors I caught, the clients I saved while you took credit. I leaned forward. I have proof, by the way. Emails, file timestamps, revision histories. The FBI knows now that every successful pitch you made in the last 2 years was built on analysis I did. You're not just going to prison for fraud, Gavin. You're going for theft of intellectual property, too. You can't. I already did. I stood. You wanted to know what I was doing with Mateo. I was using my mind for something that mattered. I was working with people who respect my skills, instead of stealing credit for them. I was becoming the person I should have been all along if you hadn't spent 2 years convincing me I was mediocre. You don't get to say my name like it still belongs to you. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and the medical debt you always threw in my face? The one you said made me dependent on you? Mateo paid it off 3 days ago. My brother's tuition, full scholarship already arranged. The apartment we shared? I'm not coming back for my things. You can keep it all. Claire, I looked at Mateo. He's all yours. I walked out. Behind me, I heard Gavin start to beg. Heard Mateo's voice, low and cold, explaining exactly what would happen if Gavin ever tried to contact me, speak about me, or even think about me again. I didn't wait to hear the details. Outside the room, Marco was waiting. He handed me an envelope. From Mr. Ricci. Your new identification, bank accounts, and the address for your new office. New office? Top floor, private suite. He said something about needing a partner who could keep him honest. Marco's expression was almost approving. Welcome to the organization, Ms. Monroe. 3 months later, I sat in my office on the 40th floor, reviewing acquisition documents for a tech startup Mateo wanted to invest in. The due diligence was sloppy, and I'd already found 3 red flags that would have cost him millions. My phone buzzed. Dinner at 8? I have a new deal that needs your eyes. M.I. smiled. Typed back. Only if you're cooking. I'm tired of restaurants. Done. Bring the tech startup analysis. We'll work after. Work after. Which meant we'd eat, argue about the investment strategy, probably end up on his couch with spreadsheets and wine. And later, much later, we'd stop pretending work was all we cared about. It had been 3 months since the night at O'Hare. 3 months of learning Mateo's business, meeting his contacts, building cases and structures that walked the line between legal and necessary. 3 months of late nights and sharp conversations, and slowly understanding how power actually worked in this city. Gavin was in federal custody, awaiting trial. The Calabrese brothers were dismantled. Dalton and Cross had restructured, hired new compliance officers, and quietly asked if I'd consider consulting for them. I'd declined. I had better work to do. My door opened, and Mateo walked in without knocking. He did that now, treated my space like it was his, the same way I'd started leaving my things in his house. We hadn't talked about what we were, hadn't defined it with labels or promises. But I kept a toothbrush in his bathroom, and he kept my favorite coffee in his kitchen, and sometimes that felt more permanent than any words could be. The tech startup is a disaster, I said, not looking up from my screen. The CEO is cooking the books, and his CFO is either complicit or incompetent. How bad? Walking away bad. Unless you want to acquire them, fire everyone, and rebuild from scratch. Matteo came around my desk, looked at my analysis over my shoulder. His hand settled on my neck, thumb brushing along my jaw. "What do you think we should do?" he asked. "Not what should I do. What should we do? Equal partners." "I think we walk away," I said. "There are better investments, less risky, more potential. I have 3 other options that make more sense." "Show me." I pulled up the other files, walked him through my analysis. He listened, asked sharp questions, challenged my assumptions. We argued about market projections and risk assessment, and somewhere in the middle of it, his hand slid into my hair, tilted my head back so he could kiss me. "You're distracting me," I said against his mouth. "Good." Another kiss, deeper this time. "You've been working for 12 hours, you need a break." "So do you." "Then let's take one together." He pulled me to my feet, hands settling on my waist. "Come home with me. We'll work on the investment strategy over dinner, argue about everything, and then I'll spend the rest of the night reminding you why you chose this life." I looked up at him, this dangerous man who'd given me a weapon and taught me how to use it, who respected my mind and wanted my body and treated me like an equal, even when we both knew his world was darker than I'd ever imagined. "You mean remind you why you chose me," I said. His smile was slow, genuine. "That too." We left the office together, hand in hand, walking into the Chicago night like we owned it. And maybe, just maybe, we did.